Welcome to the IBJ Podcast for the week of April 4th, 2022. The podcast is brought to you by Taft. I'm Leslie Weidenbender, the editor of IBJ. This week, our regular host Mason King is on vacation, so we turned the podcast over to IBJ arts writer Dave Lindquist, who reported last week that world-renowned tenor Andrea Bocelli will be performing in Indianapolis for the first time on December 7th with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. In this week's podcast, Dave talks with the symphony's CEO, James Johnson, about how the show came to be and what will make it special for the ISO and for the city. Plus, they dive into what's upcoming for the orchestra, how the hunt for a new music director is going, and how the symphony is working to diversify its organization as well as the works it is performing. Here's their conversation.
I'm Indianapolis Business Journal reporter Dave Lindquist, and I'm happy to welcome James Johnson, CEO of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra since 2018, to the IBJ Podcast. Hello, James.
Hey there, Dave. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. We're getting together one day after a major concert announcement for the city. Famed Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli will make his Indiana debut December 7th at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, where he will be accompanied by the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra.
We could not be more excited about that, Dave. It's been a long time in the making, this concert, and we are so proud to announce that yesterday for all of central Indiana to hear. It's going to be a very special occasion. It's during the holiday season on December 7th. For those fans of the AES Indiana Yuletide celebration, take heart, you can attend both. We are not going to be one competing over the other, but right in the middle of the Yuletide run, we'll also be with Andrea Bocelli in concert.
That was one of my questions. I was wondering if there was a little juggling in the schedule.
A little bit had to go on, but we're not going to be in two places at once. We've made sure that that's going to be a dark night for Yuletide celebration, and we'll give our full attention and the full orchestra to Andrea Bocelli that evening.
Excellent. That's a Wednesday, I believe.
It's a Wednesday, December 7th at Gainbridge.
All right. May I ask you to talk me through kind of how the concert came together in terms of the ISO's participation?
You know, this was something that, as I said, we've been working on for a number of years. Andrea's team reached out to us, I think in 2019, it may have been before that, and they were looking at coming through on a Midwestern swing. And he usually tours twice a year during the holiday season and also around Valentine's Day in the U.S. And it's just aligning the dates when the orchestra's available, when the Gainbridge Fieldhouse is available, when he's available. Took a lot of time, but I'm really proud to say that this all is going to work out really well for us.
So I'm always curious, and hopefully listeners are too, how much advance work happens between now and the performance? I mean, from an outsider's perspective, your musicians are incredibly adept at, throw a challenge at them, they'll turn on a dime, get it done. But how does it work when you're tasked to work with a touring musician like this?
You know, it's really most of what the work is about logistics for the concert itself, and making sure the business deals are all wrapped up in advance, and the ticket sales are going smoothly, and we're taking care of donors and sponsors and that sort of thing. But when it comes down to the music itself, I think people would be surprised to learn that the musicians, will have the music to look at in advance. But essentially, the rehearsals start the day before the concert. There's another rehearsal on the day of the concert, and then they do the concert that evening. And that's not at all different than what we do in any week that the ISO performs. So, for example, we have concerts this coming weekend with our former music director, Krzysztof Urbanski, and we'll start rehearsals on Wednesday with the orchestra for that, for the first concert on Friday. And frankly, there'll be plenty of time to work out the kinks and get ready for the concert, but it's not something we have to necessarily have rehearsed weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. It usually just happens really close to when the concert takes place.
That is super impressive. Okay, you mentioned ticket sales, and you also mentioned his team reaching out to the ISO. I'm very familiar with the world of popular concerts and promoters such as Live Nation or kind of mom and pop promoters. Does the ISO have a promotion role in this event?
We have really two aspects of the deal might be of interest to listeners. One, of course, is that the services of the orchestra are paid for by the team behind the concert, and so they are essentially hiring the orchestra for a couple of for the rehearsals and concert. And then we've made a special arrangement to reserve a certain number of tickets through the Bocelli team as well as Gainbridge Fieldhouse to use as a fundraiser for the ISO.
Oh, great.
So we're going to have a limited number of seats, and it's going to be a VIP event. There's some details on our website that people can look at indianapolissymphony.org. And essentially, we're going to be selling those tickets at a premium to raise money for our education and community engagement programs. And it's really a great way to enable us to support the programs that give back to the community. And it says a lot about Andrea Bocelli, that this is an arrangement he does wherever he goes on tour, I understand, and giving the orchestras an opportunity to give something really special to their best patrons, to have those great seats, but also to support the work that the orchestra does in the community. So we're really proud to make that part of this deal.
That's great. And it kind of dovetails into this next historical thing I wanted to talk about, just touching on the rarity of an artist of this stature coming to Indianapolis. Luciano Pavarotti performed here twice. In 1986, he played Market Square Arena, and in 2000, he played Conseco Fieldhouse a few months after it opened. At the Market Square Arena show, the ISO accompanied him, and the show was partially a fundraiser for the Indianapolis Opera. How would you describe the chance to catch an iconic tenor such as Bocelli?
I wouldn't hesitate to get tickets if you're interested. I think, in fact, I'm fairly confident this show, which tickets go on sale April 11th, and I think it's going to sell out fairly quickly. So I would hope that folks would make up their minds fairly quickly that if they want to attend. There's no guarantee when an artist like that will come back through the market. I hope that he will find that the Hoosier welcome is, as usual, unparalleled in the country. Not only will he have a world-class orchestra accompanying him, but he has a world-class audience. And that's certainly what artists have found time and again when they've come through Indianapolis. What a great community this is to play for. So we hope that will inspire him to return often to Indianapolis, but there's no guarantee. So when you have this opportunity, you got to jump on it. And we as an orchestra, this is something, as I said, we've been working on for a number of years, but when the decision time came, I have to say, we cleared our schedules to make this happen.
I think it's not a stretch to say, the lifestyle we've been living for the past 2 or so years accentuates how important it is to do. I have a Facebook friend. His mantra is always, buy the concert ticket. Like you just said, you never know how life unfolds when or where you're going to have the opportunity to experience something.
The saying is experiences, not things. Right, and so for the past 2 years, sure, we've been able to go online and buy something, and it's delivered to our home, and that's great, and what an incredible convenience that has been. But we've been missing these experiences, and something like the Bocelli concert with the ISO is just an experience not to be missed. And I will say that since we've come back to giving concerts this past fall, it's been a slow but steady increase in attendance and people really realizing how much they've missed the live concert experience. And so you look at this summer's schedule, and there are concerts happening almost every day by big-name artists, whether they're with us or at the other venues. And that's because there's a pent-up enthusiasm to experience live music once again.
Now, this concert is happening in an arena with a seating capacity in the neighborhood of 15,000 people. What are the challenges when you place this style of music in a room like that?
what's changed since I started in the business decades ago was the sound quality of the loudspeaker systems is so much better than it was before. So the musicians can hear better, and certainly the audience will hear a beautiful sound in the field house. And so the challenges from just an audio perspective of being in a big auditorium have really been addressed with the contemporary loudspeaker systems that we're using. And then you've got the incredible opportunity for video and lights. It really is an incredible visual spectacle these days as well. And that's something new that we've been playing with at Hilbert Circle Theater when we do concerts. More and more lighting effects, use of video and other things that enhance the experience. We never want to detract from the experience of hearing and listening, but certainly that's all part of the experience now. You want to have a comfortable seat. You want to be able to have a visual spectacle as well as hearing music that you love.
I'm thinking of two things at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, previously Banker's Life, previously Conseco. The best hour of audio I've ever heard in that building was the Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young came, and they played 2 sets. The first set was unplugged, and the second set was fully electric. That first half, unplugged, was pristine. And I think when tours come into a building, I think sometimes they want to overpower the room, but going the other way, I think, really helps sometimes.
So this concert will be, in many respects, Andrea Bocelli unplugged. Now, he's never plugged in with necessarily a ginormous rock band behind him. He's certainly has some elements of that, but it's with an orchestra, and an orchestra is all about nuance and quality of sound. We'll have a full symphony orchestra behind him. When you're working with instruments of quality like that and a sound palette, a color spectrum that an orchestra offers, you really get a chance to hear things you haven't heard before. And I'm hoping there'll be moments of quiet and just real beauty. I mean, that voice of his is just none other like it. And you need an orchestra behind that voice to just wrap it up in a blanket of beautiful sound, and I think you'll be able to hear that at Gainbridge.
All right, I'm getting fired up. The other thing you mentioned, you don't want to detract. I remember the first time I saw Paul McCartney in that room, and he had an amazing video display, and I found myself during the show saying, "Don't look at the video. He's right there. Look at him." So I appreciate what you said about that.
It's certainly. I tell you, so at Symphony on the Prairie, a couple of years ago, we installed 3 video screens that are just state-of-the-art, beautiful screens, unbelievable quality and detail. And I have to find, I've sat in, great seats, 10 rows back from the stage, and I find myself looking at the screens. And I've got to say the same thing to myself, wait a minute, just stare in front of you. There's the act, there's the artist. But sometimes the camera angles are so remarkable, and you feel like you're in the band. You feel like you're in the orchestra. And so you can't resist sometimes. And it's part of the experience, and that's okay.
Find the best of both.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 625 attorneys across 11 offices, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. IBJ Arts reporter Dave Lindquist is talking with the ISO's CEO, James Johnson, about what's ahead for the organization.
This morning on YouTube, I watched a December 2021 interview with Bocelli that he gave to the BBC. He talked about being a youngster and his parents kind of trotting him out to sing for uncles or relatives and family friends. and his stage was basically the fireplace in their home. And he said he kind of resented it. He I didn't really want to do it, but I did. And then this kind of repeated at school and at church. And he said he realized that this was his destiny to be a singer, and obviously he embraced it with time. But do you think that's a trait among musicians and great artists, that kind of they find that they're on a path that's kind of preordained?
It's irresistible, I think, for a musician. And we certainly, among the 70 or so musicians of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, you could say almost the identical story applies to each of them. You know, being a world-class musician or singer, it's not something you, frankly, can pick up, in your 20s or 30s. It's too late. Unfortunately, as much as all of us weekend warriors would love to think of ourselves as great guitar players, it really it is something that begins at a very young age. And so you've got to get the violin in the child's hands when they're 4, 5, 6 years old. Now, it's not wasted if you get it to them when they're teenagers. That's okay.
Sure.
It's never too late to start an instrument, but if you want to be of a world-class status, then you really have had to have started early and find your passion. The musicians in our orchestra, they started early, but they also, some spark was lit at some point, and it was perhaps by a teacher, maybe by their parents, maybe by an opportunity to sing in front of a crowd for the first time or play in front of an audience. And that instilled in them a desire to work at it, because this is work. It's not just all fun and games. And as a musician, as a singer, and I most assuredly, Andrea Bocelli doesn't just wake up and decide to sing in front of a stadium. I mean, he has to work at his craft each and every day as well. And so you've got to find the passion that enables you to sit in a practice room, if you're a violinist, for 10 hours a day and really hone your craft over time. And and there are times when you hit a plateau. You think, I can't get any better than where I am, but you keep working at it. You keep coming at the same problem from different angles, and suddenly there's a breakthrough. And this is how I can play this passage. This is how I can improve my sound. This is how I can play more in tune. And those breakthrough moments are just remarkable in the life of a musician, of any artist, where you realize, if I keep at this long enough, I can be at the top of my game.
That's fantastic, and it kind of answers the next question I was going to ask, because Bocelli also talked about how important it's been in his career not to pay too much attention when people tell him he's great. He described it as a humility to keep working to improve his technique. And as you just said, that's a trait of successful artists.
Absolutely. You don't let that success go to your head as an artist. I mean, the moment you do and you stop practicing is the moment you're no longer at the same level you were before. And so thinking about an unrelated artist, Doc Severinsen, for example, in his 90s and still playing, he practices trumpet hours every day. And he says, if I don't, then the next day I can't play any longer. And I will say that the same is true for our musicians. You talk to them and they go on vacation and they bring along their mouthpieces just to make sure they keep the technique going. And it's almost a fear they have that they put down the instrument for more than a few days, then the technique goes away. So they have to really work at it to maintain that level. You're born with a natural gift. You're born with talent, but unless you work at it each and every day, the talent atrophies. And at the end of the day, it's the work that matters.
You just brought up Doc, and I wasn't necessarily going to bring this up, but you have an interesting Tonight Show lineage, right? You worked with Skitch Henderson?
I did, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, Skitch is not a name that people today will recognize, but Skitch was the first music director of The Tonight Show, and I had a chance to work with him at really the end of his career I was appointed to be the executive director of the New York Pops at Carnegie Hall. So I got to work with Skitch about the last 5 years of his life. And for me, it was a life-changing experience. He introduced me to music that I hadn't heard before. And then, Skitch was one of these people who knows everybody and has been everywhere. And you were either a friend or you weren't. And so no matter who you were, and he had a lot of friends. And so I had an opportunity to get introduced to some people that I still count as my friends today who are, wonderful artists of all stripes.
Fantastic. Unless I missed a big announcement, the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra presently is searching for its next music director. What are you looking for in that person?
It's a great question, and we've been fortunate to have had in Krzysztof Urbanski a wonderful artist, someone who really endeared himself to the audiences, and so we're certainly looking for someone who has those qualities. Can conduct a lot of music, a lot of repertoire. Also has a magnetic personality. But one quality that's, we've identified is really important and that our musicians share as well. The music director has to be a wonderful ambassador to the community for the ISO. They've got to be able to and willing to and be enthusiastic about reaching out to everywhere in the community and bring new people to the ISO, reach out to new groups that may not have thought themselves part of the ISO's orbit, and bring them into the Hilbert Circle Theater for concerts. We've got a real challenge that our audiences are, they've got to be replaced and sustained over time. People. So where are you going to find those audiences of the future? And a music director has a role to play. In some ways, the music director of the ISO has got to be the leading spokesman or woman for classical music in Indianapolis. And they've got to be able to articulate why this music is so important, why it should be part of everyone's life, whether they play an instrument or whether they just appreciate the music. The music director has got to be somebody who stands up for that.
Is there a timetable for the hire?
We're waiting until, obviously we're working at it every day in terms of recruiting guest conductors to work with the orchestra week in and week out. And you've certainly seen a number of new faces conducting the orchestra this season, and there'll be more next season. We want the right person to be the music director, and so we'll be patient in that regard. I have to say, I don't want to come across as somebody who's just a homer, but I have heard from guest conductors who stood in front of this orchestra recently that the orchestra has never sounded better. They're excited to be in front of this orchestra conducting. And frankly, some conductors who might not have considered the opportunity to become music director are having second thoughts once they hear what this orchestra can do. These musicians are phenomenal, and together they're creating some incredible sounds at Hilbert Circle Theater. So I've got a sense that there's a real enthusiasm for what's going on right now with their playing, and so I am confident that we'll be able to attract a very high-quality music director for this orchestra.
I like it. That sounds great. I'm not sure I'm clear. The pandemic affected many things, of course. Did it affect Krzysztof's transition or the end of his term?
It certainly did. Krzysztof, we had mutually agreed that the, I believe it was the 2019-2020 season would be his concluding season with the orchestra. And unfortunately, of course, we had concerts scheduled, and in March of 2020, that all came to a halt. And so while we would have loved to have enabled him to conduct the concerts that were scheduled for him, unfortunately, the pandemic had other plans for us. And so we weren't able to give him, the real celebration that he deserved as our outstanding music director. And so we'll continue to have Krzysztof back for concerts in the future. And of course, there's a real soft spot in this community for him as a musical leader of this orchestra. So, we'll have other opportunities to give him time on our podium. But unfortunately, the pandemic stood in the way of our best laid plans.
Also related to the pandemic, health checks. The present policy at Hilbert Circle Theater is proof of vaccination or negative test required. You can bring food or drink into the concert hall now.
You can.
And face coverings are recommended. I see that this summer's Kroger Symphony on the Prairie at Conner Prairie will not require proof of vaccination or negative test. What factors in the ISO's decision?
It's with real a sense of relief that the pandemic seems to be subsiding, but we've got to be cautious. And I think as a society, we've got to be careful that not to get ahead of ourselves in saying that it's over, because we've said that before and been completely wrong. I think back to July of 2021 when we all thought, let's go out and party.
A beautiful 3 weeks.
Exactly. So we're being cautious. What I don't want to do is reimpose requirements on our patrons. Sure. We want to be just, as we lift these requirements, we want to lift them and never go back if we can avoid it at all costs. We've also been very consistent. The same requirements that you see for guests of the ISO are the ones that employees have had to follow, as well as volunteers. And so we're trying to be consistent across all of our stakeholders. And I'm hopeful that as we look at the numbers, frankly, of cases, and we look at the recommendations from the CDC, and then we ask our medical advisors and our team of advisors from the science community, as we get their advice, we can be less stringent about these requirements, and perhaps by the end of the season we'll be in a different place. I'm really hopeful that we can be more open with going forward. I certainly get letters all the time from patrons who are less than satisfied with our policies. I've always said the same thing. We do this to protect the most vulnerable among us. I'm not suggesting that the ISO is full of vulnerable people, but we have to be aware that there are those who are immunocompromised, or they live with people who, for whom the disease could be a death sentence. And so let's just be patient and cautious. And soon enough, we'll be back to as it was before.
I know we're right around the corner of announcements. We've got the Symphony on the Prairie season and then the 2022-23 season. Anything you'd like to share with listeners as a sneak peek?
Well, this will be released on Monday, April 4th, and on Tuesday, April 5th, we'll be releasing the details of our Symphony on the Prairie season. So with respect to that, I want to be careful not to let the cat out of the bag. But I do want to say we'll have 25 concerts out of Symphony on the Prairie. I could not be more excited about the performances that we've got scheduled. There'll be 10 concerts with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. I have heard from our patrons in the past couple of years how much they enjoy listening to the orchestra at Conner Prairie. And so there'll be more concerts than we've had in several years with the ISO at Conner Prairie. I can also tell you that plans are on the horizon in 2023 to have even more concerts with the orchestra. I think there's just nothing like being out at Conner Prairie listening to an orchestra. And there's just something really magical about that. We're in partnership with Conner Prairie to present this season. We'll have, as I said, 10 concerts with the orchestra. You, for sure, are going to see the Star-Spangled Symphony, the perennial favorite around the 4th of July out there. We'll have some headline artists. We'll also have very favorite tribute groups as well. So there's a lot to be enjoyed out at Conner Prairie. So we encourage people to look it up on our website and come join us. Different this year than we've had in the long-term past is that we do require that people purchase a date-specific ticket. We no longer have the voucher system.
Oh, okay.
But with that, we have a very liberal exchange policy, and certainly if there's a rain out, the tickets, the value of the tickets is immediately put back on your account. You can come another time. So there's really it's a risk-free proposition, but we do ask that you choose the date you want to come. By doing that, though, we're enabled to have more one-night performances, and so there'll be different groups on Fridays and Saturdays, and so there's a lot of variety this year. We really think that there's going to be something for everybody. Every type of music that you enjoy, you'll find out at Conner Prairie.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's really become an Indiana experience that people should have.
Well, for years and years, it was Marsh Symphony on the Prairie, and when unfortunately, Marsh went through a patch of tough times, and of course they're no longer here. I would say Kroger stepped right up as our sponsor, and they were excited to be part of this event. And now, people who are looking for the lowest price tickets, go to your local Kroger and you scan a QR code right there in the store. It's exclusive to the stores, and you get access to the lowest price tickets. So we're glad to have Kroger as a partner.
Okay. So we're talking a little bit about finances. I wrote about Newfields recently, and as part of that reporting, I checked in on their endowment, which grew 27% between June 2020 and June 2021. Has the ISO experienced a similar increase?
We've been very fortunate in that the endowment is it's very healthy. It's healthier than it's been in a number of years. Right now, it's about $110 million in its value. It doesn't compare it's not in the same ballpark necessarily as those for the Newfields or the Children's Museum, which have much larger endowments, but it's a healthy endowment. And frankly, that endowment enables the ISO to serve its community year in and year out with great community engagement education programs. And that's, it doesn't allow us to forego annual fundraising. We have to ask our community to support us each and every year, but it does provide some necessary help, particularly when there are years where fundraising or ticket sales might be impacted by something like a pandemic. To have that steady support from the foundation is just critical.
Does a healthy endowment mean that labor relations are better or more concrete? And
I don't know that it impacts our labor relations per se. I can tell you, of course, that we do have a unionized workforce of musicians and stagehands, and they certainly do look at the financial health of the ISO overall, including our endowment, but how we're doing on ticket sales and how we're doing on contributions. I will tell you, we started a new labor agreement with our musicians this year, a new 3-year agreement.
Great.
And for the first time, we have musicians serving on our board of directors. And so they have access to the same information that the board does. And I believe in transparency in what we do. I want to be transparent with all of our stakeholders, including our patrons. But definitely our musicians are seeing how we're doing at the quarterly or the every other month we have a board meeting. They get those statements of how we're doing on ticket sales, how we're doing on fundraising. And so I hope that we can provide them peace of mind that we can meet our obligations. And having a strong endowment enables us to meet our obligations. The worst thing we could do would be to make promises we can't keep.
Sure.
And so if we have the assurance that the endowment is healthy and that, frankly, we're not raiding it to keep our lights on, but it's being managed well, and we're being good stewards of the community's resources. Because don't forget, it's the community that creates that endowment over time by gifts of one kind or another. And so it's the community's contract with the orchestra that they make this gift. They expect those funds to last in perpetuity. And so they expect us to be good stewards of their funds.
Excellent. Thank you. Last year, I interviewed University of Michigan professor Louise Toppin about her African Diaspora Music Project, in which she catalogs works by black composers that haven't been published or have been underperformed or have never been premiered. Indianapolis is also home to the Melanated Moments in Classical Music podcast, co-hosted by Angela Brown and Joshua Thompson, which does similar work in showcasing black artists. I know the ISO earned praise for its You're Invited campaign that emphasized an accessible and welcoming message about the orchestral music And the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra is an ISO program that's a fantastic model for inclusion. Does the ISO have plans to showcase more works by Black composers in the future?
Indeed, we do. And in fact, there are almost every one of our concerts during the classical series this year, and it will continue next year, has a work by an artist of color. Of course, in classical music, we've been underrepresented by gender diversity as well. And so I will tell you that last week, as this program is airing, we're doing a program of music by composers from Finland. Well, we're featuring a work that was written by a woman composer from Finland in the 20th century that's probably never been performed in the U.S. before. Mm-hmm. So we are really looking for undiscovered composers of various backgrounds and showcasing their work. We have the honor of having a stage in Indianapolis that enables us to celebrate music by composers from all types of backgrounds. And so whether it's a composer from the Black community, a Latinx composer, a composer who's been otherwise marginalized, we have the opportunity to showcase their work. So we have later this season, Awadajan Pratt, a wonderfully talented pianist, has commissioned a work from Jessie Montgomery that we're going to be premiering on our stage. So a female Black composer, a Black pianist, etc. So, this is an example of how we've made a commitment to diversity on our stage. But it really has to go. It can't just be representation on the stage. It has to permeate through the organization. And so we have asked ourselves the hard questions of, how do we have greater diversity not only in our music, but in who's playing the music, who's in the audience, who is behind the scenes as well. And these are some questions. Some of these questions are easier to answer than others, and it's some systems are very pervasive. And we're trying to address that, for example, with the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, where we're giving opportunities to young musicians from across the community to be part of something apart from themselves, be part of an orchestra. And certainly we're reaching into all areas of the community with the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra. We call it a youth and family development program. It's not just about getting the child to be a better musician. It's about improving the whole child, including their families. And so when a child first comes into the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra, we ask a parent or guardian or caregiver to come with them and learn the instrument alongside that child.
That's cool.
So that they get to be, so then the student becomes the teacher. And it's true that usually that's the parent that's struggling with the instrument, where, the 5 or 6 year old is racing up and down the keyboard or the fretboard and can teach the parent.
Thank you for your time today, James. I will close by sharing that ticket information for the Andrea Bocelli performance. Tickets go on sale 10 a.m. April 11th to the general public. They will be available at GainbridgeFieldhouse.com and at the venue's box office. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to James Johnson for talking with us this week, and to IBJ's Dave Lindquist for filling in for Mason King. Before you get on with your week, there are a few stories I wanted to mention in this week's IBJ. Dave Lindquist and real estate reporter Mickey Shuey each have stories about the construction underway in Broad Ripple. Dave details how the city is working to fix drainage issues along Broad Ripple Avenue, as well as upgrade a bridge and put in a new trail. Mickey updates the latest apartment and commercial projects that are underway or will be soon. Also, John Russell explains how the surge in Eli Lilly and Company's stock is boosting the assets at the Lilly Endowment, which increases the amount the endowment must give away. And as Dave mentioned during his conversation with James Johnson, he reported a story about the status of Newfield's diversity and inclusion efforts 1 year after its president resigned in the midst of a race-related controversy. You can find all of these stories and more in the latest issue of IBJ and at IBJ.com. Thanks for listening today. Mason King will be back next week.